All right, what about practical advice? If one of you is thinking about trying this, what's the best approach to take? I'll go into some of the details, but there's a key point to remember. What you're really doing is not trying to lose weight. What you're really doing is trying to adapt your body to be able to run on its stored fuel. And this can only be allowed, this can only happen if you allow your body to do it. And I know that sounds like a kind of a smarty answer, but that's actually what you have to do. You have to allow time for your body to adapt so that it's running on its own stores. So let's go through the science of how that works. How much energy is in your body? I did some calculations, being an engineer here. In your bloodstream, you have about 5 grams of glucose, basically like a teaspoon or tablespoonful of sugar. That's all you have, right? That will last you 10 minutes if you're very active and 20 minutes if you're not. So if that's all you had, you'd be dead pretty quickly if you could only run on the energy that's in your bloodstream. The next thing you have is glycogen, which is in your liver and your muscles. That's a stored form of carbohydrate. There you actually have 1,000 grams, a kilogram of it, about 4,000 calories worth, and that'll last you a day and a half to 3 days or more, right? And athletes know that, and they carb up and they build up their glycogen, and that helps them with endurance. But that's still going to run out. Where's most of your energy? It's in your backside, your belly, your thighs. It's in your adipose, your fat. You've got 15 kilograms of that, 135,000 calories. And depending on your activity level, it'll last you between a month and a half, 47 days, and 3 months, 94 days. So you actually can survive without eating off of your fat. Now, it's going to be very uncomfortable for most people because they're not adapted to doing that. The analogy I like to use here is looking at vehicles. So an overweight person we'll call the tanker, right? It's a gasoline tanker truck, right? Huge store of fuel, but it can't really get access to that fuel. It's just driving it around. And the marathoner here is the mini. A lot less mass, but paradoxically can get to that energy much more easily and for a longer period of time. Now, this is upside down. It should be the opposite, right? The bigger person, the bigger vehicle, should be able to run more easily on all that fuel. So why can't the tank get access to that fuel? Well, a lot of it has to do with insulin and insulin resistance. This is a study showing the level of insulin in the blood on the y-axis. And on the x-axis, it's time, it's minutes. So you've got about an hour, 2 hours here, okay? On the bottom there, you see the plots for a lean person, for glucose and fructose, 2 carbohydrates. The 2 very sharp peaks there are for an obese person. And you can see their insulin level is just shooting up several times that level, right? So that's a little clue there. The insulin level is much higher in that obese person. Well, what does that mean during the course of the day and eating? And this is really where you've got to look at the details of meal frequency. On the top, I'm showing the insulin levels for a lean person. And what you see here is there's a line in the middle between the blue and the red. In the blue zone, you are storing fat. Now, fat is always moving back and forth between your fat tissue and your bloodstream, and so is sugar. But it's predominantly moving in one direction or the other, right? It's always a flux and a balance. So on balance, it's moving into storage if you're in that blue zone, that high insulin level. If you're in that red zone, it's coming out of storage. And every time you eat a meal, you bump up, and those little green bumps are breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then there's this yellow period between the meals where you're actually starting to burn fat. Well, guess where you burn most of the fat? It's actually, assuming you stop eating around 7 or 8, and you don't eat breakfast till the next morning, a significant amount of fat mobilization while you sleep. And I proved this to myself. I weigh myself at night and in the morning, and that's most of my weight loss is between going to sleep and in the morning, assuming your insulin levels are reasonably low. Now, the obese person has, unfortunately, a strike against them. What happens is they have a higher basal insulin level. They start out with a higher insulin level. They start out barely with a little bit of ability to burn fat, and immediately their response is much higher, and immediately everything they're eating is being stored away, which not only is going on in their body, it's making them hungry because it's depleting the fats and the sugar out of the bloodstream, so you're feeling hungry all the time. And you get these little dips between meals, and you're starting to feel hungry, and you eat again, and it goes up. And you can see, on balance, the lean person eating the same meals is in caloric balance. The obese person is gaining weight, so they're going to cut back even more. And a lot of it has to do with insulin resistance, which, again, it can be dealt with by intermittent fasting. So that's the obese and the lean person. What about meal frequency? So I've taken the same plots here and shown it for a person eating 6 small meals a day, somebody eating 3 meals a day, and somebody eating 2 meals a day. And what you see is if you're eating those 6 meals, yeah, it's true, you might keep your insulin level lower, the actual peak levels, but it's never allowed to come down low enough. You're never getting down into that fat burning zone. And then immediately you're eating again. So you just never allow the fat to come off. You never allow that glycogen to get away. You see a few little dips, and you're even eating close to midnight, so you're loaded up and you don't get much fat burning going on while you sleep. 3 meals a day, a bit better, assuming you cut out the snacks, right? You're in balance. 2 meals a day, now we're getting toward intermittent fasting. Keeping our meals close together in a window, we've got a long period in the morning, say up to lunch, where we're burning, and then assuming we stop eating around 8 at night, we've got from 8 p.m. till maybe noon the next day. We've got a lot of hours where we're burning fat. And we're not only burning fat and glycogen, our insulin levels are coming down, we're getting all of those health benefits, hormesis, it really helps us with degenerative diseases. There's a really interesting study on the internet, and I've linked this. This is a guy, Lee Shuri, he was diabetic. Active guy, kayaker, whatever, but he was diabetic. His blood sugars here in the red were around 150, which if you, type 2, he was type 2, right? So he tried 3 different diets. The ADA recommended diet, he tried a low carb diet, he tried adding exercise in, tried losing a little bit of weight. The red, the green, and the blue, he made a little progress, but not much. And then he did an experiment, and I just wanted to read you this. At age 34, I had elevated blood sugars and was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I lost weight, maintained a low glycemic diet, drastically reduced carbohydrate intake. I had a bit more energy, but my sugar levels were not normal. I decided on a somewhat novel experiment. I'd wait until my sugar levels dropped into the normal range before I would consume food. So he's measuring his blood glucose. He's got one of those little meters. I have one too. Even though I'm not diabetic, I find it a very useful tool. He says, I stayed with the same low glycemic foods and maintained the same exercise levels to gauge the effect of this new regimen. Upon waking in the morning, I tested my sugar levels and found they were typically 150. I expected them to come down by noon, but I was surprised they stayed above normal for quite some time. I held off eating until nearly 6 p.m. when my blood sugar was finally normal. At this point, I wanted to eat a huge meal, but I had a normal dinner instead. And as the evening progressed, I snacked on healthy, low glycemic foods. After following this regimen for days, which stretched into weeks, I discovered it provided a whole new level of physical energy and mental alertness. After the first few days, I was already untraining my body of the expectation that food would be provided at set meal intervals. After a week or so, I no longer felt hungry until about 4 p.m. And on some days, I do not get hungry until 7 or 8 p.m. But if I feel hungry earlier, I wait until at least 6 to eat. Through experimentation, I found the body can do quite nicely without food, even when exercising. This is in stark contrast to traditional sports nutrition advice, but it works well for me. I've often gone out to sea in my kayak from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., 7 hours without eating before or during. So his diabetes is effectively cured. He doesn't have to inject insulin. He's got normal insulin levels. And this is an experience that was really resonating with what I was finding too. So why does intermittent fasting work? And why is it better than just normal calorie restriction? Well, if you can keep those insulin levels low, not just your peak insulin levels, but sustain them, you'll get improved access to your glycogen stores because your glucagon levels and your adrenaline levels will go up, so you release the sugars from the muscle. You'll get improved access to your fat stores by reducing lipoprotein lipase. and also by increasing hormone-sensitive lipase, which allows the fat to come out of your adipose tissue and be used as fuel. And you get access to ketones, which is another useful source of energy. If you fast for short periods, you will gradually, with time, speed up the rate at which you upregulate those enzymes and hormones. At first, it's a little bit shaky. The more you do it, it's like getting in a well-worn rut, and you can easily shift over to this mode. And the way I like to think about it, again, going back to the tanker truck and the Mini, is that instead of running on one fuel, which is sugar, you now have a flex fuel vehicle. You can work on sugar, you can work on fat, you can work on ketones, and you can shift between them as your day demands them. And the fact is, most people eating very frequent meals can't do this. It's a very hard transition shifting over to fat burning, because you just don't have all the enzymes and the hormones in the right place.